Do you have children?
I do, a girl.
Children have always deviated from the human norm. That is, if we define a human as something that has a fixed identity and behaves in accordance with its own free will. What then are children, those early-stage humans who exist in a state of chaos? Even though they physically resemble humans, they differ from them drastically, mentally and emotionally. The dolls that little girls play with when they pretend to be mommy aren't merely surrogate babies or toys on which to practice mothering skills. Maybe these girls aren't just rehearsing for motherhood. Perhaps playing with dolls is very nearly the same thing as actually raising children.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
In other words, raising a child is the quickest way and as close as you can get to realizing an age-old dream. Creating an artificial human being. That's how I see it.
Children aren't... They aren't dolls!
Do you know Descartes? He didn't distinguish between man and machine, organic and inorganic. He owned a doll that resembled his daughter Francine, who died at age 5. He gave it her name and he adored it. I almost forgot about that.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence from 2004.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, this is actually a little bit based on a specific chapter.
Yeah, one chapter in particular.
Robot Rhonda, which I didn't understand 2 weeks ago, but you kind of explained it to me, and then I reread it this week, and I kind of understood it.
Excellent.
Based on your explanation. So this is the one where there's this old, maybe retired colonel who's golfing, and he's got these two robots with him. One's like a caddy, and one's just like a sexy bodyguard that's hanging out.
Yep.
We don't know it's a bodyguard right away, but he asked for the caddy to wipe off his sweat or something, and it goes crazy and attacks him, and the bodyguard robot blows it up.
Yes.
And
they're both sexy robots, incidentally.
That's right.
In case that wasn't clear.
Yes, of course they are. And so it turns out that a bunch of robots have been going berserk and attacking their owners, particularly these Tom Leand models.
Yes. And these
they're
are demo
prototypes.
models.
They're demo models. There have been 8 of them out there, and 8 of them have malfunctioned, and they're built by Honka Robotics. But because 2 of the victims were, one was like a politician and one was this military, they're like, okay, well, we have to consider terrorism as a motive.
And that's why Section
9
gets involved, because they're anti-terrorists.
That's right. And there might be
in the manga, I think.
Yes, that's right. That is right. Meanwhile, there's like people protesting how robots are being treated. It's just like a side one-page scene of protests happening.
Yes.
They go to Ishikawa. He seems to be working for the cops for some reason. He's not in Section 9. I don't know. Never knew what's going on in this comic. Anyway,
I think that's
Ishikawa thinks that part of the problem is, robots are being scrapped. There's like this planned obsolescence happening, and that's part of the problem. I'm not sure how the two things are related in this or in the movie, that these robots are going berserk because they're being scrapped, which it's like a lot of robots. He's got a whole junkyard of robots. He's got like all these cages of robots. But meanwhile, there's these other 8 robots, and somehow there's some
It's in the
connection.
manga, this just goes nowhere. Like so many pages in the manga, it's completely tangential to what's going on, I guess, in the main plot, which has to do with why these robots are going berserk.
These specific 8,
Yeah. This is also present in the film, as you point out. And in the film, it's offered as an explanation, but is also completely irrelevant to the plot, though perhaps not irrelevant to the themes of the film.
Right.
I say perhaps because the themes of the film are somewhat opaque to me.
We'll get to all that. So basically, these robots, they find that they have SOS written in blood on their brains.
Pretty cool detail, I must say.
Yeah, and I was like, what does this look like? But actually, I noticed this time, like the brains are actually like a little box or like a hard drive.
Yes.
And it's just got SOS on there. So it's actually, I was kind of visualizing it as like a brain, like a human brain with SOS in blood. I was like, how does that work? But actually, I just didn't notice the panel the last time I read it. Honka has this cyborg boss who's like he's like a box. He's just like a box with 4 stick legs. He looks like a table. He looks like a coffee table.
Yes.
It's a really funny thing. There is a footnote in there from Shirow saying, yeah, this wouldn't work. You can't have a cyborg that doesn't have like appendages.
This
there's a
thing
long footnote about
This
how
thing I've drawn wouldn't work.
yeah.
So wild. I've forgotten about him, the little box.
Yeah. So at Honka Robotics, this boss is chewing out the shipping inspector, and they think the shipping inspector is the guy that put the SOSs in the brains. They're blaming him for it. He is to blame for it. And they fire him. And as he's leaving the building, Bato and Togusa show up. It's mostly them in this story, actually. There's not much of the major in it, which might be the reason it was chosen for the second movie.
Perhaps.
It was a factor anyway. So they show up, and they show up coincidentally at the same time that the shipping inspector is leaving the building, and that shipping inspector is sniped. So there's a kind of cool action scene where Bato and Togusa go after the sniper. And then this is where we find out that there was a connection to... They were like trafficking children from the Philippines. There was some connection there. And they find out that what was happening was these Tomland robots had ghosts in them, which they were not supposed to have because they were like pleasure bots.
Yeah.
But they had illegal ghosts in them, which were being copied over, as you mentioned a few weeks ago, from these kids that have been trafficked from the Philippines.
Yeah.
And the dubbing process kills the original...
Kills the children.
Host. Yeah, kills the children.
So it was a cheaper way, rather than design an OS from scratch for the robots, it was kind of like cheaper essentially, to just dub it off some... Just imagine that. Like, there's an analogy for capitalism for you.
Yeah.
It's cheaper to traffic children and scoop their brains out of their heads than it is to just write software.
Yeah, so they rescue the kids, but Bato chews them out because, like, the robots killed some humans. It's much like the Major chews out...
Chewed out those kids that were in the sweatshop in that earlier comic.
Yeah. And then they have a chase because the boss is escaping in a car, and he falls into, like, they're going to a boat at the docks, and he falls into the water. That little robot, that coffee table robot, falls into the water, and they're like, well, we'll just scoop him out later. And then they realize that the colonel actually has a connection to this. He's kind of there's kind of conspiracy behind it, like he owned that building that Honka was using or something
corruption.
like that. Yeah,
another cyberpunk theme. Here we go, we have corruption and money. So that's kind of like the message.
Yeah. So that's probably all we need to cover.
That pretty much sums it up.
Because the movie's kind of loosely based on it.
Here I would say there's not much going on thematically in this particular story, aside from the usual cyberpunk themes of the corrosive influence of money on the political process, corruption, kind of crappy future where human life is very cheap. But otherwise...
Yes, but also complaining about the protesters protesting for robot lives.
Yes, that's interesting. That just doesn't seem to really go anywhere. I don't know. Shirow just drew a page or two of people protesting about robot.
For robot rights, yeah.
Yeah, it never comes up again, except with the Fuchikomas, I suppose. There's sometimes... There's some, like, humorous stories in the manga where they're advocating for...
Right.
For a robot rebellion.
Yeah, and I think even in one of these stories specifically, maybe it was this one, where they want natural oil instead of synthetic oil, and Bato uses natural oil. Oh yeah, it's the next story where they go to Russia.
Yeah.
Because, but the Major's like, that stuff you can get like molds and infections and stuff in natural oils. The synthetic stuff is better. And actually one of them does break down because of the natural oils that Bato is using.
What is the point? There is no point. It's just
it's just an idea.
It's just goofy. Another idea that he didn't explore.
And he's like, well, I gotta write this down. Like, it's an idea I've had. Then he puts it in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so this movie comes out in 2004.
So this is directed and written
written by
Oshii.
Ito. That's a key point.
So, yes, that's right. The first film, the 95 film, was written by Ito, as we mentioned. Yeah. He did a fantastic job. Yeah. He also wrote that Gamera trilogy.
Yes, that's right. That's the 90s Gamera trilogy, yes.
Yeah, but this one, importantly, I think, is written by Mamoru Oshii and directed by him.
Yes.
You did talk a bit about Oshii when we did 95.
Yeah.
It's worth talking about him a bit more.
Yeah.
He's, as you said, he kind of has he's had sort of a long career since I think the late 70s in working in manga. He's well known for being a bit weird, I would say.
Right.
He's a little bit like the impression of Shirow you get from reading Ghost in the Shell. He has some eclectic interests.
Yeah.
judging from this film exclusive, I think this is the only film, aside, I've only seen his Ghost in the Shell movies.
Okay.
But basing on those, I would say his interests are, first of all, he's interested in the Bible.
Right, yeah.
He's interested in European cinema.
Yeah.
And literature. He's interested in philosophy and weird shit I've written. He's also really keen on dogs.
I was about to say, I bet he has a beagle. I bet he has a pet beagle.
Not only does he have a beagle...
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's a basset hound. No, it's a basset hound, not a beagle.
Right.
Not only does he have a basset hound, the basset hound is called Gabriel, which is the name of the basset hound in the film.
Right. I thought that because I was thinking about this James Gunn Superman movie that's coming out with Krypto in it, and Krypto is not like Krypto in the comics. He is he's modeled on James Gunn's dog.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Oshii apparently thinks he's a dog.
Huh. Okay.
I read in more than one place.
Okay.
Or at least perhaps the reincarnation of, or incarnation of a dog in a human body.
Well...
He's that kind of guy.
Yes.
He started in the late 70s, as I said, as a storyboard artist, and then transitioned to directing episodes of, as you said, Yurusei Yatsura.
Yeah, and he did 2 movies.
The first one apparently is just fairly standard.
Yeah.
The second one is called Beautiful Dreamer.
Great movie. I have seen it. I'd forgotten about Innocence. I did see Innocence in the cinema in 2004 when it came out, because I was like, hey, there's a Ghost in the Shell cinema. I'm in Japan. I would see it. Had no idea. But watching it yesterday, I was like, holy shit, he did this in Beautiful Dreamer. The time loop.
The time loop, yeah. Yeah. So Beautiful Dreamer is, as you said, we'll probably end up covering it. In fact, I would very much like to cover it. So we can't talk about it too much.
Yeah.
But essentially, and this is his kind of final... This has something to do with his style. One of his style is he's very big on visuals. He's very big on putting basset hounds in his films. And he's also big on, I've written thought-provoking, humorless adaptations, very, very different in tone from the source.
Ah, interesting. Yes.
So apparently the Yurusei Yatsura. So Yurusei Yatsura film is a character. It's sort of like a fun manga by the Ranma one half.
And, Rumiko Takahashi.
Rumiko Takahashi, who apparently was unhappy with Beautiful Dreamer because she felt that it was too different from the source material.
Yeah.
So it's a sort of light-hearted harem comedy.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's great fun. Takahashi's one of the all-time greats, and all of her manga are really great.
But Beautiful Dreamers, Oshii's version of it is all like weird time loops and reality warping.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
He's a final note. What else have I got down for his style? As I said, he's very big on visual storytelling. He in all of his films have a 2-minute dialogue-free montage.
Interesting. I was watching the 2-minute dialogue-free montage in this one and thinking, why is this in the sequel when it looks so much in terms of like tempo?
It's very simple.
Like that scene in the first one where she's in that boat going through the rivers of the canals of the city.
Yeah.
Very odd, yeah.
Yep. So that's apparently something he does in most of his films.
Okay, I see.
That it wasn't. I was like blown away by it in '95.
Yeah.
Thinking this is integral to the story.
Yeah.
And then I watched 2004 and I said, oh, he just does this every time.
You know what it reminded me of a little bit was in Tarkovsky's Solaris. There are very long passages of him driving around.
Yes.
Right? And you're thinking, boy, you've got to go into the mind, much as we went to the Major's mind as she was going through the canals. We go into that character's mind in Solaris and go, what's he thinking about? As he's driving around for minutes and minutes. And then later we learned, of course, those scenes were shot in Tokyo. And he had to use the footage to justify to the Russian government traveling to Japan to film it. That's why those scenes are so long. There was no artistic point to it. It was like, otherwise I'd get arrested.
Wild. Well, Oshii did a lot of travelling for this movie, 2004.
Okay.
And a lot of the stuff he saw when he was travelling made it into the film. Probably not for similar reasons. Some final points. He likes mirrors.
Yes.
So there will usually be mirrors.
Yes, we'll talk about that.
And the blending of dreams and reality.
Okay, yeah.
He's also famous for a multimedia kind of universe called Kerberos Saga.
Okay.
Which is set in an alternate fascistic Japan.
Okay.
So a late 20th century Japan where history went differently, and there's kind of like a right-wing authoritarian government in control in Japan. Most famous for Jinro, the film.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But there's been like a radio show, there's been
yeah.
computer games, there's been mangas, there's been live action movies. It basically every medium you can think of, he's produced a work of this Kerberos saga in it. Jinro is on the cheat list because it's based on a manga he wrote first. However, because Kerberos didn't start as a manga, it doesn't quite fit the criteria.
Right.
But, you know, we might make an exception depending on how we feel.
Right.
The only to finish up, collaborators. The composer that composed the score for this film and for 95 is Kenji Kawai, as we mentioned in 2 weeks ago. He's worked with him in 10 films.
Right.
And Oshii has been on the record as saying 50% of his success is owed to Kenji.
Yes. Okay. I think did I make a joke about his name being deterministic?
Yes, you did.
Kawaii pianos. Okay.
The Kawaii pianos. You did. Yes. All right, on to this very strange film.
Yeah. So we get a couple of title cards that tell us that basically the Major has disappeared into the net.
Yep.
And it's basically Bato at this stage.
Yeah. Bato. We find out that Bato is a total cyborg conversion, like the Major was in the last film. I think that was not mentioned in 95.
No, and we get a point halfway through the movie where the Chief Aramaki is worried that Bato is becoming like the Major.
Yeah.
Like he's in the same kind of state of mind of questioning. Yeah.
He certainly is melancholy.
Yes, that's the best word for it, yeah.
He was far more cheerful in the first movie.
Yeah.
And even aggressively unintellectual.
Yeah.
Because his reaction to the Major transcending, he just sort of goes, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
See ya.
Yes.
Have fun out there.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so it starts with... we also get a title card saying that there's been some brutal murders.
Yeah.
And it starts with Bato arriving on a crime scene. First thing we notice is we've got a mix, I'm not going to say a blend, or a combination of CG animation and cell animation.
Yes.
So CG backgrounds, like hallways and stuff.
Yes.
And then you'll have like a cell animation, Bato walking through this hallway.
Yes.
It's distracting.
Yeah.
There is definitely CG in the 95 version, but it's used to augment
it's much
scenes
more
like...
I think this is... Because it was so much more difficult and expensive to do CG in 95 that they used it sparingly.
Yes.
Here, Oshii has gone all in.
And it seems like a shortcut. It's like, let's not draw this hallway, let's CGI this hallway.
It does seem like that. Yet I read an interview with Oshii where he said it actually was more work.
Yeah, right.
Because they would have to draw it.
Well, I did start to question maybe the way he wanted me to question it. There's this particular scene where he opens a door into a convenience store and there's a bell and it's CGI, but it's so photorealistic. I thought I was looking at a shot image of the bell on the door of the convenience store. Yeah. And then he walks in and it's cell animation again. I'm like, maybe I'm supposed to be looking at 2 levels of reality here on purpose?
That's very astute of you, Kumar, because that's exactly what I think he wanted to do with that scene. And I can confirm it because I listened to the director's commentary.
Okay.
I think for the first time in 130-something episodes, I watched the film twice this week.
Yeah, right.
I've never done that before.
Yeah.
I watched it so that I could watch it again with Oshii and I think his director of animation.
Okay.
Who essentially, unfortunately, he didn't talk at all about the themes or about the plot. It was almost as though they weren't aware they were being recorded, and they just kind of reminisced about the production of it. And they talked a bit about, he didn't specifically, about how hard it worked, about how some guy was hospitalized.
Wow.
They're just like, hey, remember, he said, remember Imura? Remember how he had to take a month off? Oh yeah, he was hospitalized. This is like a conversation they had. And talking about how one of their lead artists was always running off to the arcade to play Virtua Fighter.
Huh.
Like, yeah, I used to have to go and get him from the arcade when we couldn't find him. And he'd want to keep playing. And I said, if I could beat you, then you have to come back to the office. But I could never beat him. Like, just, why are you telling me? I want to hear about some of the choices, storytelling choices you made.
Yeah.
All right, where it's relevant, I'll try and remember stuff from this commentary.
So, Bato goes into this crime scene.
Oh, sorry. your original point
Yeah.
about the convenience store. Bato is being hacked in that scene.
Yes.
So apparently that scene, I think, took 10 months to animate.
Whoa! Okay.
And they were, 10 months to animate, according to Oshii on the commentary. And the reason it looks the way it does, like that a kind of odd wall-eyed sliding effect, is because Oshii wants us to know that something's happening to Bato in this scene, which is that he's being hacked by somebody.
Yeah.
Much like the puppet master was hacking him, was able to hack him in the first one. As the logistics of that I want to return to from a storytelling perspective, but from a visually, that's what you were supposed to think, so well done.
So he goes in there, at the end of this hallway there's this kind of pleasure bot, which...
So like a geisha in a...
Yeah, kind of, and she like tries to kill herself.
Well, she tries to kill him first.
Yeah.
And he whacks her with sort of like brass knuckles, which look really cool, electrified brass knuckles. Yeah. Really cool, never show up again.
Right.
Very, kind of like a very Shirow sort of moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Not the last one.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, she very disturbingly kind of tears her own chest open and her innards pop out.
Yeah, and her face pops open. It looks just like what we saw last week in the live-action version. There were actually some things in here which didn't realize that were picked up for the live-action movie that came out.
The live-action one we watched last week drew specific imageries and sequences from this movie.
Yes.
So last week was not just an adaptation of 95, it's also an adaptation of this week.
Yeah. Well, I think you noted some of them last week, but there was more.
Yeah.
This
I saw
one.
a
I was
lot.
like, holy cow,
There were heaps.
that's where they got that from.
He even shoots the robot in the face when he really shouldn't.
Yes.
When it does its kind of like Jack in the Box.
Yes, and the robot coroner complains that he blew it up, which is what happens in 2017.
Yes.
And she's also a chain smoker.
Yes.
And
that's why.
That's why.
You know, we were saying that really bugged me.
Yes. We were going crazy last week because she was smoking.
Why was she smoking in this sterile environment?
She's smoking because they ported it in from this movie and didn't think about it.
No.
She's got the flip-up eye as well, like the cybernetic eyes, which is a touch that I liked in that movie. I was like, wow, this is a great invention for this movie. They didn't invent it,
and it's so much better in this film.
Yeah.
Because it's the very last thing we see of her.
Yeah.
After she's just had a big philosophical diatribe.
Yeah.
We don't know if she's baseline human or robot.
Right.
Or cyborg. And then the very last thing she just reveals that her entire head is cybernetic.
Yeah.
A good thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2017 it just happens halfway through that scene.
Yes. It's just like a cool thing.
It's just a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we get the credits. Now, the credits are full CG this time.
Yeah.
Unlike that 95 version, which is burned. Those images are burned into my mind.
Unlike that beautiful sequence, this one feels repetitive.
Yes, same music.
We've seen it before.
Uses the same theme music.
Well, it's slightly different.
Slightly, yeah.
They've got more of these old ladies singing the traditional wedding chants.
Right.
Apparently 85 of them this time. I don't know, were there 85 in the whole of Japan? I guess they found them.
It starts out with this kind of like cell division that like turns into cybernetics. I thought that was like a cool idea. But it's
instantly passed over and we just start seeing the robots kind of being assembled. But unfortunately, like they obviously did a lot of work. An enormous amount of work.
Yeah.
This film took almost 3 years to make, and on the director's commentary, Oshii says that's extremely rare. Like 2 years would be the normal kind of turnaround for something like this. Absolutely, people were being worked like dogs.
Yeah.
But CG ages.
Yes.
Just whereas a cell animation doesn't.
Even now, a CG shot looks like a CG shot. You can tell it's not a real place or a person or a thing.
Yeah. Even this year, yeah. But it's especially true in 2004. I'm sorry. It's aged, and it just doesn't look. It's also less visually interesting. It's less arresting.
Yeah.
We don't have the enormous industrial machinery everywhere that the Major's cyborg body was floating through.
Yeah.
That sense of over-engineering that I kept talking about over and over. That's not present. Instead, they're just sort of like mirrored and sort of. They look like they're dancing with one another. Yeah,
it splits into two beings that almost kiss each other, like the Björk video.
Yeah.
Really. Can't remember what year that came.
Incidentally, Oshii bitches about the Björk video in there.
Does he? That's interesting.
On the during this sequence, he says, "Oh, a lot of people were saying I ripped off the Björk video.
Yeah.
I definitely did not rip off the Björk video."
So we learn that the next scene is a briefing with the chief and Bato and Togusa.
Yeah.
And the chief tells them that there have been these 8 gynoids built by the Locus Solus company.
Corporation, yeah. The original, my subtitle said rocks.
Yeah. I know.
Rocks Sol.
Rocks, oh, of course.
Rokusol.
Rokusol.
So Rocksol was the name of the company.
Right.
But then, hilariously, later on in the film, the subtitles changed to Locus Solus.
Bad download of subtitles.
It's a bummer.
Look for the official ones. The official subtitles are good. Because I actually watched this twice, so what's as bad?
You watched it twice as well, yeah.
And then I watched it and I was enjoying it the second time around
Yeah,
a bit more, the first half of the movie at least.
4 times between us, that's great.
Yeah.
People are getting value for their money, I tell you what.
Yeah.
Locus Solus is the name of a novel.
Okay.
This film, like Shirow's manga, and I think unlike 95, is chock full of references.
Yes.
Endless
But they're
references.
just references.
Yes.
They just say the thing.
Yes.
And then walk away from it.
Yes, it's a big problem, I think.
And it's something I've seen in other Japanese. Maybe they were like lifting from this, but there's a series called Psychopaths where they go into some rich guy's house and there's a library and somebody picks up a book of German philosophy off the shelf and reads a line from Heidegger or something, and then walks away. And we're supposed to be like, ooh, this shit's deep.
That's unfortunately the impression I get from this movie. Yeah. So Locus Solus is the name of as I said, a sort of like early surrealist novel from, I think, the late 19th or early 20th century.
Okay.
Essentially about an enormous mansion full of bizarre art and tableaux vivants.
Okay, I wish I'd known this. I wish somebody in the movie had said, did you know that this company named itself after this book that's about a weird mansion?
Yeah, well, they go to the weird mansion.
Yeah,
and
but I didn't know why they were at the weird mansion.
Exactly.
I didn't know what Locus Solus was.
Except that weird mansion has nothing to do with the company. It's run by... It belongs to a bloody... third character.
Yes, we'll get to all that.
But... Okay, I'll talk more about Locus Solus when... another book that's important, or I guess that's referenced, in the opening sequence, we get a close-up of an eye. There's a lot of close-ups of eyes in this movie. Doesn't seem to serve any kind of thematic purpose.
No, especially since... I mean, you can't help but think of Blade Runner, which very specifically was about eyes and sight, and I've seen things you wouldn't believe, and all that kind of stuff, and you get all those close-ups of eyes and stuff in Blade Runner.
There's no real reason. It's not about perception,
but it is about reflections. There's a lot of talk about mirrors and reflections in it.
Yeah.
In a way that I did not like, because in the first movie, the Major, when she's watching the interrogation of the garbage man, she's looking at her, we see the shot of her reflection. There's no comment on it. And then when she's on the canal boat, we talked about the scene at length, she looks up and she sees herself.
Yes.
That's how you do it. There's no commentary on it.
No.
Here, they talk...
They just jabber about it
They
incessantly.
talk about how your evil is created through your reflection, blah, blah, blah.
So much gibberish.
Like...
So, on the eye, there's some text in that zoom in, and one of the text says "L'Eve Futur," which is a late 19th century French novel called "The Future Eve" or "Tomorrow's Eve."
I've heard of this.
Oh, you have? Yeah. In fact, it's the work that coined the term android.
Okay.
So it has an android in it. Mm-hmm. The android is called... it's a female kind of like a android, and it's called Hanley or something like that, or Handley, which is the name of the brand of gynoids which appear in the movie.
Right, okay.
Yeah. I looked at both of these books. I downloaded them both, but because they were written in the 19th century when novels was apparently a contest to see how long you could possibly write something, there is no way I was going to be able to read them in a week.
Right.
So I did not.
Right. Right. So Aramaki tells the guys that we've had these 8 Locus Solus gynoids go crazy. One of the victims was a politician, one was in the army, so there's a possibility of terrorism, as in the comic.
Yep.
And also, the families of the other victims are not suing. We learn later that's because these were sex bots, and they didn't want all this business to become public.
Yep.
And
they'd sort of been modified to have like sexual input.
yes.
Yeah. So this isn't off the shelf as well.
That's right.
So it's not just that they were sex bots; they were custom. They were boutique sex bots.
Yeah.
So the families sort of like don't want this made public.
Yeah. So, Bato and Togusa go to the police station because the police have the body of the pleasure bot that Bato shot up.
Yep.
This is where Togusa used to be in the police. He was recruited by the major intersection.
Yes, right.
So
That wasn't clear to me at first, but I eventually got it.
Yeah. This, for some reason, when they approach this guy and they're Section 9 is taking the case, this guy's really angry.
Yeah.
About this, to the point where he kicks a garbage can after they walk away. He's so pissed off that this case is being taken by Section 9.
Yeah, any idea why he was so angry?
No. And in fact, they try to have... There's a conversation between Bato and Tokusa in the elevator where they're talking about how pissed off he is because we're taking the case. But it didn't really... I didn't quite get it. Anyway, they go up, they talk to this chain smoking lady.
Her name is Haraway.
Haraway.
She is another reference.
Okay.
She's named after a feminist scholar and cyborg theorist called Donna Haraway.
Okay.
In an interview, Oshii was asked about his familiarity with her scholarship. He replied, "I've actually read some of her works, and they were very interesting. But I didn't try to make the character resemble the actual Donna Haraway. The character design was based on a professor of a college in Italy who took me around during location hunting."
Huh.
I've looked at pictures of Haraway online. She actually does look a bit like this character.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, often, sometimes, like in this conversation in the elevator, they're talking about why the cops are angry, and he'll give some random quote
Yeah.
from something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
As if it's,
I didn't.
And
There
it's
were a lot of
inscrutable.
quotes.
And I'm like, I don't see how that explains why this guy's so angry. Anyway.
There are so many inscrutable quotes. I didn't recognize half of them.
Yeah. So they go up to this lady. This lady, again, as you mentioned before, a lot of weird speechifying, theorizing about how children who play with dolls. I couldn't keep track of this.
It was very weird in the original subtitles we watched. It's not really clear. Something about her theory as to why they're going nuts is because robots are discarded.
Yes, similar to the comic. She says, right, the theory that Ishikawa gave in the comic, she basically the similar lines. She says they're being discarded. So a lot of these, she's got a lab full of robots that are maybe have malfunctioned. Again, what's the connection to these 8 gynoids, which we know are tampered with?
Well, we know, but we know, and we will eventually.
So I guess it's incidental. But she does talk about how children who play with dolls are.
It very quickly gets really arcane.
Yeah.
She starts talking about a theory of, I guess, behavior or reproduction where she compares the dolls or robots to children, kind of like dolls and robots is used interchangeably in dialogue, to children, saying that they are not truly human, in the sense that children are not truly human because they haven't completed their development and don't have genuine free will. And that then she goes on to say that people have children out of a frustrated desire to create dolls.
Yes, now, part of the problem is I never knew when they used the word dolls if they meant dolls or robots.
Well, they use them interchangeably.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a problem.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a lot of pseudo-philosophical pontificating in your film, you need to be strict with your terminology.
Yeah.
As if you were writing a philosophical work.
Yeah.
Terminology is very important because discrete concepts are important when
I could
talking about
very
philosophy.
easily see at the script stage, every time the word doll appeared, ningyo, they might have italicized it effectively or something like that.
To show that we mean doll-like robots.
Yeah. But when you're reading, when an actor's reading that, there's no indication
No.
that when she means people want to create dolls, she means robots with no consciousness, question mark? I'm not sure. Oh, and there's another thing about in the manga and this is that the robots are deliberately malfunctioning themselves so that they can break Asimov's laws of robotics.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about
humans.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. If her theory is that they want to die. All of this is nothing eventually to do with the plot, incidentally.
Right.
Because it has no bearing on solving the murder. The murders. Because we later find out why they are acting the way they are, and it has nothing to do with any of what she's saying.
Yeah, they're not self-breaking down, are they?
No, they're not angry because they're being discarded. They're not deliberately attacking humans as a form of suicide. She says, you mentioned the 3 laws. She says that, she doesn't mention them by name.
She calls it Code of Ethics number 3 or something like that.
But we're familiar with Asimov, so we know that the 3rd one is that a robot may not do any harm to itself unless it conflicts with the 1st or 2nd laws. The 1st law is the one that says may not harm a human being. But here she says that she confuses it with she says that that's the 2nd law, whereas actually the 2nd law is it must obey a human being.
Or they're not using Asimov's laws for robotics here. We only hear this one stated.
Yeah, but I think if you mention 3 codes of ethics the robots must obey, there's not really... Anyway, so saying that they attack human beings, and by that attacking them, that then breaks the 3 laws, and then they can violate the 3rd one and kill themselves. Yeah, I have a question. If you can violate the 1st law or the 2nd, laws that are arguably more difficult to violate than the 3rd, why don't you just violate the 3rd to start with?
Yeah.
Why is it easier?
Well, but don't you think Asimov's rules are gotchas in the first place?
Yeah, they don't
They're
make any
there
sense.
to create mystery stories around where how did they break this law?
Yeah, exactly. Of course they are. They're not... Just to open a tab, I think John Sladek wrote some really great books about robots where he basically just takes the absolute piss out of the 3 laws.
Right.
And just how little logical sense they make actually. It's like, what's a human? How do you define it? You know, things like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so now, as they're leaving the doctor's office, they get a call that there's been another murder. Just by coincidence, right there. So they go over. It is the guy it's this guy who's a shipping inspector.
Yeah.
He's been murdered very brutally on this houseboat.
It's a houseboat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somehow they figured out there's some Yakuza connection. This is very complicated.
I think there's a
bit of this. It seems there was a.
It's one of my questions. How do they know about the Yakuza? One of the people killed by the gynoids was a Yakuza boss.
Yes, and the Yakuza pinned
How would they do
on this shipping inspector for some reason. But this is basically in the manga that shipping inspector was sent out, and then he was sniped. Yeah. By a guy, I think a Yakuza whose boss had been killed by a gynoid, and they tipped off the Yakuza.
Yes.
Hanka tipped off the sniper and said, "This is the guy that's responsible for your boss's death."
You know what's happened? I have a theory. A missing scene.
Okay.
Another thing I learned from listening to the director's commentary is they were under a lot of time pressure, and they cut scenes.
Okay.
Sometimes they cut scenes that were important.
Yep. There's definitely one later on, which we'll get back to.
I'm sure you picked up on it. So I think there probably was a scene where Locus Solus tipped off the Yakuza.
Right. There is a line in there, and it just went by, and I was like, "What?"
There is no way that, because this turns out he did it, right? He plays the same role in the film as he did in the manga. He is the guy that made it possible for the robots to go berserk, sort of.
Yes.
He doesn't write SOS.
Yeah.
But he did something.
He leaves a help me message. So actually,
you're right. He put the
doctor had that first sex bot had said "help me" before Bato killed it, and when they come to this Dr. Haraway's office, she says everything was wiped, which is standard when these things shut down. But there was one vocal code left on. It was just "help me" repeated over and over again.
Yes, that's right. He put that "help me" in.
Yeah.
Yes. But their behaviour was caused by something else, which we'll get to.
Right.
Incidentally, the gynoids themselves, I might mention it now, they're really creepy looking.
Yes, they look like they look like artist dummy, artist pose mannequins.
They do look like mannequins. They're specifically designed based on the art of a German artist called Hans Bellmer, and in fact, there's a book in the shipping guy's office of his work.
Yeah, and in the end credits, there's lots of credits for doll makers and designers.
Oh, they made them. They made props for everything. Anything that was made into a computer graphic, they made props for.
But I will say it's very interesting compared to the sexual objectification of the first movie, where the Major was nude all the time, and we were given the fan service of looking at her. And here, these are not
They're not sexy.
sexual
They're
beings.
unsettlingly erotic.
Yeah, they're J-horror kind of things. They flip around at the climax, because they can twist around like an artist mannequin.
They
just
have
flip around and
large balls for joints.
ball joints, yeah.
Very large ball joints, which is what the original kind of models that Belma did. Apparently, they're quite disturbing to look at.
Right.
Really unsettlingly erotic.
Right.
And Oshii made a trip to New York. He says this is what inspired him to write the film. He went to the International Center of Photography in New York, and he saw an exhibition of the dolls, and that's where he got the idea for the gynoids. He says they are so beautiful. These dolls are so famous for the balls they have for arm and leg joints, and they are so beautiful. No, they're really creepy.
Yeah.
I must say, we're compared to the Major and the nudity in the first film, where everyone is long and limbed and sexy, like the way Shirow would draw them in his comic. Here, they are not long-limbed and sexy. They're creepy and rubbery.
Right. Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Along with the CG, the heavy use of CG, and the different looking cities, visually it's very different from 95.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Enormously different.
Absolutely. So they search the shipping inspector's houseboat. Weirdly, Bato picks up a random book. It seems to be random, but it's actually that book you mentioned, the German book, off the shelf and he flips it over, he finds a little holo photo in there. How did he know this was in this book?
Yeah.
So strange. Such a strange moment.
Yeah.
But there's a photo of a girl, that's the kind of holo photo we were commenting on this last week. The Garbage Man had a holo photo of himself, which didn't make any sense. But it's the same style. It's the same style. It's a little.
I missed that. That's another thing that popped up.
It's a headshot that's on a card, like it's a hologram on a baseball card.
This makes no sense. I mean, it's in a book. There are other books in this. So first of all, it's in a bookshelf.
Yeah.
But every book is the same. Okay, fair enough. So these are decorative books, not books that you would actually read.
Yes.
Apparently, Oshii on the director's commentary says, people give me a hassle about how all these books are the same. And I'm like, they're showing their ignorance. They've never visited a stately home in Europe. Right. It's like, you're right, they probably haven't.
Yeah. This is a houseboat in Tokyo?
Yeah, it's a houseboat. It's not a fucking stately home.
But you got all these... And by the way, the text in that book was in Korean.
It was.
There is some bits of Korean text in this movie.
Yes.
Which wasn't there in the first one.
No, and it was all Chinese text in the first one.
The drone kind of things are speaking a language which is not Japanese, and I was wondering if it was.
I'm almost completely certain it's Cantonese.
Okay.
I didn't get time to check with Van. But Oshii in the director's commentary says it's Mandarin. We'll get to it. But listening to it, it didn't sound like Mandarin, it sounded like Cantonese. Okay. But using some very kind of like technological jargon that I didn't understand. Right. Alright, so the Korean... So, I mean, he picks out this book because it sticks out like a sore thumb among all of these books of an equal height and same coloured covers. It sticks out. But it's not the only book in the building. There are books stacked around the place. Why didn't he pick up any of those others? And it just happens to be a book about the gynoid, the style of gynoids that the robots are based on, or the style of mannequins that the gynoids are based on, and also contains a photo of the little girl that, spoiler, they have to end up rescuing at the end of the movie. This is way too many coincidences. Yeah. Way too many. I thought the book was in Korean maybe because later we meet a Korean character associated with Locus Solus, the hacker Kim. Kim is a Korean surname. But there's no reason why a book belonging to Kim would be in the possession of the shipping inspector.
Yes. Yeah.
No reason at all.
No. We get a long sequence where Bato hangs out with his dog. There is a moment in this scene where we see his warped reflection in a toaster that I thought was okay. That could have been in the first movie, maybe. I don't know what's doing in this one. I don't know. We have to have this 5-minute scene where he's just sitting on
hanging out with his dog.
Dog's looking at a hologram of a fish, weird fishbowl. I don't know.
Yeah,
but weird moment. I guess it's. I mean, I can't complain. If this had been in the '95 movie, I would not be complaining about it. I'd be like, "This is a cool scene."
Yeah, but here it doesn't.
Now we get the briefing with Section 9. Looks a lot like the briefing we had last week in the live action version, where it's the team standing around this holographic
pit, sort of it.
Yeah, and it's like a big orangey, reddish, just kind of projections of like objects from the crime scene and stuff. And I thought that was like a weird thing in last week's movie, but actually they've lifted it from this. And when they leave, it actually turns out Aramaki wasn't there. It was a hologram, which disintegrates pretty similarly to the way the holograms disintegrate in 2017.
Pretty clear aesthetic inspiration. Well, not just aesthetic, like the scene, the setting is based on what we see here in this film.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where we learn that there's some sort of Yakuza hierarchy. Somehow the Yakuza were involved in this murder. Don't remember how they worked this out. Maybe it wasn't even explained clearly. But they know that it was some sort of weird claw weapon that killed this guy.
Yep.
So
because their door handle is... They do a kind of like forensic analysis of the door handle, and they conclude that it was done by a specific kind of claw modification. And we even see a hologram of it. The hand flips back and these scissors come out. They're more like scissors than a claw. Yeah. But, whatever.
So Bato and Togusa go over to this Yakuza base.
I think this is when Aramaki warns Togusa that Bato is starting to lose the plot.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that is the moment.
We get a random line. Aramaki says one does not need to have been Caesar to understand Caesar.
Yes.
Apropos of nothing.
He's trying to explain it. Togusa's like, why me? Why am I in Section 9? Why am I keeping my eye on Bato? I'm not a cyborg. And that's what Aramaki says. To understand Caesar, one need not be Caesar.
This is a fairly famous kind of quote from, I think, Max Weber, the sociologist. Just sort of about how you can study man without having lived his... I mean, it's pretty clear exactly what it means.
Yeah.
There's no real reason why Aramaki would say it, though.
He's erudite.
It just seems like... everyone's erudite in this fucking movie.
Yeah.
They're going to the toilet and, dropping quotations all over the place.
Yes.
There's really kind of like pseudo-intellectual name-dropping is occurring here.
Yeah. Okay, so they go to this Yakuza place and they shoot the hell out of it. Bato goes in there like a Punisher, absolutely blows everybody away.
Yeah, he's just murdering them.
Yep.
Is his brief cover just straight up murder?
Well, no, but he actually gets in trouble for this. And in fact, they try to frame Section 9, the bad guys, for this shoot up and also for an incident that happens later in the convenience store. They're trying to bundle these together as Section 9, overstepping their bounds, etc. And even Togusa's like, don't shoot anybody when we get there. He's like arming up. He's getting all these...
He has this huge gun.
And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, Bato's like, I promise I'm not going to shoot the place up. But as soon as he gets there, he's like, I tried not to shoot the place up. He shoots the place up.
He just absolutely unloads on them. And he kills about 20 people. Yeah. We never see any bodies. Oh, we don't see many, but we don't really see... We see them getting shot up, but we don't really see a lot of dead bodies.
Yeah.
That apparently was a deliberate choice by Oshii, because he says the film is about dolls, so I didn't want to show dead human bodies. We only see the dead...
Well, yeah, but dolls. He does... I mean, Bato hacks their brains so that they see a hologram of him and they're confused.
Is that what happens?
Yeah.
How does he hack their brains?
I don't know, but there's a line which says... The bad guys say, he hacked us! That was a hologram!
That's not in the Japanese version, is it?
Don't know.
I don't think it is.
Okay. It's in the, anyway, it's in the sub and dub.
Hang on, so he shoots the shit out...
Yes, and then there's like a blurring effect.
He shoots the heck out of them standing in that doorway.
That's right.
Like, they die. Yeah. They're all shooting at him. No one hits him.
That's not a hologram shooting at them.
No.
That's him.
Then, in the next... There's a scene transition, and then he's a hologram that flickers out, and then he's shooting them from a different... I thought he had optic camouflage, which he used only for that moment and never again in the rest of the film. That's what I thought
the first time I watched it, but then when I watched it the second time, that line was in there where the thugs are like, he hacked us!
That explains a lot.
Alright.
I don't remember it from the Japanese version.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's not in the Japanese version and the English dub added it to explain what the fuck was going on, because it was not clear.
I think the dub might be a bit massaged, but I don't have any complaints about that.
How could he hack them? That's not what he does. He hacked 20 people at once?
Yeah, I don't
How did he do that?
Yeah.
Did he use a deck? Freaking Puppet Master needed to use 2 proxies making phone calls from all around the city, and Bato can just do it?
Just by Wi-Fi, strange.
That's bullshit.
Yeah. So, he fights the Yakuza boss to get some sort of information from him. They're attacked by the claw guy. There's a bit of a fight. This is like a central action scene in the movie.
It's pretty rad.
Yeah.
Despite being infuriating. And then, so Bato subdues the cyborg claw guy fairly easily.
Yeah.
I like that he has an enormous shoulder joint.
Yeah.
Which I like. Reminds me of something from the manga, because I think there's a line in the manga about how you can't just attach a super strong arm to a regular human body, because it will just tear off.
Yes.
So this guy has a super reinforced shoulder
There is
joint.
a character in the manga called Koil Krasnov.
Yeah, I was
Russian
thinking
guy
of him.
who's got this big ass arm.
Yeah, and he's got a specially reinforced back and shoulder joint so that he can manipulate that arm without it falling off his body or ripping out all of his muscles. So this guy has the same modification, which I kind of liked.
Yeah.
But Bato beats him very quickly, and then, importantly, kind of plugs a joystick in the back of his neck.
Yes.
I'm glad this is in, because there's a lot of joystick plugging in the rest of the film, and if it hadn't happened in this scene, I would not have known what was going on. This is how you can subdue a person with the ports in the back of their neck.
Yeah.
If you can plug the joystick in...
Yeah, it's actually a fun kind of scene, because he is able to make the head move left or right, depending on how he wiggles the joystick.
I mean, it's pretty clear visual storytelling.
Yeah.
This thing brings whoever you plug it into under your control.
Yeah. So now Bato has to go to this convenience store to buy dog food. When he goes in there, he hears a voice tell him, "You have entered a killing ground," or something like that. It's a female voice. It's obviously the Major's voice.
Right.
And we're like, where's it coming from? He's afraid he's going to get attacked. He's suspicious of this guy. Suddenly he pulls his gun. He's shot in the arm a couple times, and the owner of the convenience store pulls like a shotgun on him, and he's about to shoot that guy, but Ishikawa comes in and stops him before he does that.
Yep.
And we find out...
Ishikawa plugs a joystick in the back of his neck.
That's right.
And we wouldn't have known what was going on if he hadn't already done it to that claw cyborg.
So what's happened is, we learn in the next scene, is that Bato was hacked in the convenience store to think an attack. He shot himself in the arm somehow. I guess he had two guns?
Yes.
One which he was drawing and one which is shooting.
After watching that scene twice, I don't see how he...
No, I didn't either.
I mean, I kind of get how he shot himself in the arm, but then in the next shot, his gun is shot out of his hand.
Yes.
And he didn't shoot his gun out of his hand.
Maybe
he imagined.
Maybe it was a convenience store guy.
No, because we see him pulling the shotgun out from under the... Nah, it's just...
By the way, Bato being repaired here looks a little bit like 2017 Bato being repaired.
Yeah, it did. You're right. You're right. Yep, so his arm's damaged. It needs to be replaced.
Right. So Ishikawa says, you've been given a mission to go up north to this place called the Etorofu Former Industrials.
Etorofu, yeah.
I can't remember.
It's kind of like a special economic zone.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
on the northern boundary, which I assume... Well, this came out in 2004, well after the fall of the Soviet Union. But I imagine it's the border between Japan and Russia.
In the manga, in the next chapter, after
of course,
Rondo,
yeah.
this is the city they go to.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's on the border of... So Sakhalin Island, in the far north of Japan, used to be divided between Russia.
So... This is where we get the 2-minute sequence of this. We see this festival happening. But this is the... Okay, so...
Hold on, first I want to talk about when they're flying into Etoforu.
Yeah.
Etoforu does not look like a real city.
No.
They're flying in one of those big feathery...
That's an interesting point, that it doesn't look like a real city, because he talks about how they pull some lines from, I think, Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene, where they're talking about how spider webs are the extended phenotype. Maybe it was Dawkins' extended phenotype, not Selfish Gene, sorry. Like a beaver dam or a spider web is part of the phenotype of that creature, and a city would be the extended phenotype of a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, that sort of comes across in the Japanese version too. They talk about how a city, is an externalized memory of human beings.
Yeah.
And then we get a quote from the Bible, Psalm 139, about how a city thoughts as numerous as grains of sand in a desert, and a city, I guess, is like built of as many memories as grains of sand. It doesn't actually make sense. That psalm is about the God, like the Christian God, and it's meant to represent his omniscience, like his ability to know and see all things at once. That's what's as numerous as the grains of sand. It doesn't apply to...
Yeah, and then Bato says, I would prefer a coral reef. to this city we're looking at. But again, the weirdness of the city, as you mentioned at the beginning, doesn't quite add up with this idea of an extended phenotype. It should look like a real city if we're going to explore that idea.
And it does. It looks semi-organic. There's this yellow mist everywhere.
And birds. So many birds. So many seagulls. I don't know what they're feeding on.
Yeah. The refuse of the city, I suppose.
I guess, but
this is supposed to be... It's really cold up there. I don't know.
It's just there. I mean, it's all about the visuals, really.
Yes, but I didn't like the visuals. I don't find them...
Right.
I found it kind of grimy and uninteresting. And also... And just really... lame in comparison to 95's very lived in, very real feeling Hong Kong, with its Chinese signage and its waterlogged streets, and its...
Yeah, right. Now we get a big CGI cathedral with a million seagulls flying around it.
Yeah, what's the message here?
Yeah.
Are we extruding bioorganic cities out of our minds? But we don't do that.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And people didn't do that in the last film. And it's only been 3 years. It just doesn't... That's Locus Solus headquarters, that cathedral. It's based on the Duomo di Milano, the Milan Cathedral in Milan. And that's it. We just see it for half a second, and then the parade starts. I think there's a missing scene again.
Definitely, because what happens is Bato meets with an old informant, somebody that knows him, and he beats this guy up for information.
Yep.
And in the next scene, they go looking for this guy named Kim in this weird mansion. This character, Kim, has never been mentioned before. We don't know why they're looking for this guy, where this information came from.
This whole segment of the film is an absolute mess. So first, we've had, incidentally, when they're as you mentioned, as they're flying into...
Etoforu? Yeah.
I think. Eftoforu? I've got it in my notes. As they're flying into it, they are just, like, they're always sitting next to one another in a car or a plane. And just uttering this absolute drivel.
Yeah. At one point there, the drivel is about dog food.
Yeah.
You should switch to dry dog food because it won't go off. It'll last longer than wet dog food. And there's a long pause, like a beat, where Bato's thinking about this dog food and then gets out of the car.
You left that in. And then they fly in, we see the cathedral, we hear all this pretentious pseudo-philosophical dialogue. Then we get it feels like 5 minute sequence of a Chinese-style parade.
Yeah.
With, like demons in traditional Chinese armor dancing around, robotic hippopotami and elephants.
It's all done in CG, by the way.
Yeah, it looks pretty good, but, I mean, there's nothing raw or unfinished about it. It's incredibly polished, but it's still old.
Yeah, it looks like CG, and even there was a certain period of time after Terminator 2 where CG was exciting. To go to see a movie and see CG on screen was exciting.
Yep.
I feel like by 2005 already we'd gotten maybe...
I think so, but Oshii hadn't.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Because this film is just full of CG.
Because that sequence in the first one where she's going through canals, we are supposed to be, I think, visually dazzled by the animation of it. And I think he's saying you should be visually dazzled by the CGI animation just as much. Now, I don't know if it's our position in 2025 looking back or what it was like watching it at the time.
Right.
And maybe at the time it was still an amazing feat of artistry.
CG just doesn't look as good as cell animation.
No, especially
it just
now.
ages so much faster.
Especially now, somehow, yeah.
And I don't know, that scene in 95, it just works so much better. I mean, we pointed out, it had it served a story purpose.
Yes.
Also, we see things from a human perspective in that sequence. We're always looking at things the way a person on the ground, I suppose, would look at them. We don't get that perspective really in this parade. It seems to be moving around and looking at it from bird's eye angles and from lower angles, and it just sort of like he's abandoned, I guess, realism.
Yeah.
And have gone for something utterly fantastical.
Yeah.
He based it on a parade he saw in Taiwan.
Okay.
So I guess it must have been a pretty fabulous parade. But I mean, he's obviously cranked it up 1,000%.
Sure.
But this is just not that interesting.
No. Agreed.
Frankly.
There's no...
Unless you're thrilled by CG.
You know what? The other thing is there's no character... None of our characters are moving through the parade. We're just seeing the parade
Bato and Togusa are sort of walking around, but
yeah, we're not looking at it through
but they don't look at the parade.
No.
It's not like when the Major looks up and sees herself.
Yeah.
That's such a great, arresting sequence.
Yeah.
Here you are in the big city, surrounded by people, surrounded by things, and you look up and see yourself. Wow. Here, it's just a riot of ambers and golds and reds and yellows, and...
But...
It's very, very polished.
By 2004, we were already getting this on consoles, right? Like on home consoles. We had on PS2, like, say, Final Fantasy X, there were certain sequences that were incredibly high resolution CG that looked like this. So I could get this at home. I don't need it on the big screen. It's a weird choice.
There's two explanations. Oshii always does this, as I said.
Yes.
This is kind of one of his things. It's one of his signature things. His films always have a sequence like this. And second of all, I think he just imagined that people would be thrilled by the amount of work they put into it.
Yes.
And it is very polished, as I said.
Yes.
But it just... If it ever thrilled...
Also, doesn't the amount of detail highlight the unreality of it? But maybe
absolutely.
he wants it to be unreal.
Yeah. I'm sure. I think he expected it to thrill people. And if it ever did, which it may have, it doesn't now.
Right.
But so we have this long sequence, for 5 minutes. And then in the next scene, we're not at Locus Solus's headquarters. No. Despite flying there, we've never gone into it. We've had no scene there. Instead, now we're on the street.
But how did you know that place was the Locus Solus headquarters?
I think they say it.
Did they? Oh, okay. I just thought it was a random cathedral.
Oh, perhaps I read
because Locus Solus is actually manufacturing offshore on that island.
That's where they manufacture the dolls, but that's like their production facility. It's like their corporate HQ or something.
I see what you mean. Okay. So, yeah, they beat up... I think this is the first mention...
But we never get a scene. And then we're down on the street, and he's finding this informant.
Yeah.
We see some children. They're wearing masks.
Yeah.
Some more children come down the stairs, and then this guy drops down, also wearing a mask. He takes off his mask. He sees Bateau. He says, "Oh shit, Bateau."
Yes.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And then runs.
Yeah.
Then we get a hard cut.
And Bateau is beating the guy up.
And Bateau is they're in a cathedral. They're in a temple.
Yeah.
Bateau is beating the guy up, and he's already interrogating him.
Yeah.
So how did we get here?
Yeah. So here's another problem with how did we get here. I think it's in this scene where we first hear about Kim. But when Ishikawa gave them the mission to go up north, he never mentioned, go find this guy Kim. No. I don't think Kim was mentioned at any stage earlier than this. It's suddenly, there seems to be a missing scene here.
100%. I think Kim... I think Kim was supposed to be found... We were supposed to find out about Kim in, I guess, the Locus Solus HQ. I would guess. But that got cut for time. They were under a lot of time pressure. And in fact, Oshii on the director's commentary at this point says there was supposed to be a scene where Bateau and Togusa chase down the informant.
Oh, okay.
When he says Bateau and runs away up the stairs,
they
were supposed to chase him into that temple.
Scene, yeah, okay.
But they just didn't have time to do it.
Yeah.
They're running out of time and money. So we get... And he actually says that. Oshii says that. There was supposed to be a scene here like that. It's cut.
Yeah.
If he's cutting scenes like that, he's cutting other scenes too.
Yeah.
So now we find out about Kim. He's some sort of electronics warfare specialist.
Yes, who is now just a hacker, we're told.
Yeah, he used to be in the army, but he has some kind of behavioral eccentricities.
By the way, this is... Okay, so before that, I just want to mention there's a shot of, during this festival, of people having a bonfire of old dolls.
Yeah.
I'm not sure quite what to make of this moment. It would have been really poignant in the 95 movie, or if this movie had played differently, where they were talking earlier about how people are discarding dolls and they're becoming obsolete, they're robots and stuff, but somehow it's just in there in the middle of all the other stuff.
It's because, exactly. It's in there for no... I think I know why it's in there.
Okay.
It has to do with Oshii and a kind of like a Japanese belief in the spirituality of objects.
Right.
So Oshii believes that dolls, by being simulacra of human beings, manifest their own energy.
Yeah.
He seems to suggest that that's a kind of a Japanese attitude anyway. Yeah. That it would not... A cremation of a doll would not be unusual in Japan, say, like a ceremonial cremation of a ritual object like that.
Yeah.
He's interested in the dolls, and he's interested in bodies as having as being more important than minds to an extent in this. He says, I have a quote from him where he's talking about what his idea for the film is. Okay, this will not clear anything up.
Okay.
But he says, the message of this movie is your body. As I get older nowadays, I make a film that is good for my body, but before that I used to make a film using only my brain. When I made the first Ghost in the Shell, I thought about what really makes your body. If you lose your arm and you keep losing body parts, what is the last part that makes you unique? The conclusion I came to at the time was your brain, and more specifically, your memory of life. Okay, that kind of covers part one fairly well. Then he goes on. When I made Ghost in the Shell 2, he continues, my conclusion changed. This time I thought, it's your body, and it's not anything specific like your arm or your leg. It's the body as an entire entity. And more than that, it's really the relationships you have with other people. When I was making this film, I came to the conclusion maybe the brain or head isn't that special. If you're accused of something and you are executed for it, that's when you lose your head. But when you go and take the responsibility voluntarily, more honorably, that's when you do harakiri and cut your body. And I think that's representative of the fact that you cannot actually sever your body. Okay, that is like a huge load of nonsense.
That might be... yeah...
But he's moved away from I suppose the seat of the ghost, the mind being the seat of humanity, and now he's more interested in things having the shape of a human being, having something of the consciousness of a human being. And that's what a lot of this kind of like dialogue is about, where the Doctor and later on Kim are talking about the human drive to perfection, and how creating dolls is part of that drive to perfection. Human beings want to become dolls,
right,
or want to build dolls and have children because they want to make dolls, or perfect beings or something like that. And there's something about the flesh that's doing that. This makes no sense to me, and I don't think any of the quotes that pepper the film build a convincing case for this way of thinking. I can't help but compare it to... I had so much to say about 95, because I think Ito is a much better writer than Oshii, and all of Ito's quotes that he selected, which were few and far between, there were only 2 or 3, and they were all very specifically about the changing nature of consciousness, and about the changing nature of identity. And it, like his biblical quote, that one... the one about the glass darkly, is about transcending. I mean, in the Bible, it's about transcending. It's about your second life in heaven, the more perfect life, as opposed to the flawed life on earth. That's clearly an analogy for what happens to the Major. Talking about one does not need to have been Caesar to understand Caesar, or that stuff about memes and phenotypes, the city as memory as grains of sand. There's even a... We'll get to it a bit later on, but there's a... No, Araki has already said it. When he sends them up north, he quotes the Buddha. He talks about going into the jungle, being alone, committing no sin, asking few questions, like an elephant. Okay, so the first film's quoting the Bible. This film, also have quotes from the Bible, but we also have a quote from the Dhammapada, the Buddha's sayings. This quote, on the surface, seems to be about something similar as the biblical quote in the first film. That it's about... If that film is about that quote is about heaven, then this quote is about nirvana. So we're getting something similar, a similar concept, a similar idea? No, that line from the Dhammapada is about lay people. It's about this life. It's part of the Buddha's discourse on how lay people can lead a virtuous life if they're not monks and they're not actively pursuing nirvana. That line is actually just about choosing the right companions.
Right.
He says you shouldn't associate with bad people.
Right.
If rather than associate with bad people, you should be alone if bad people are the only option, like an elephant in the jungle. It has nothing to do with nirvana, and actually has nothing to do with the themes that Oshii has just muddily expressed in that quote. I felt like this with almost all the time, and it's just a big turgid mess. And it reminds me very much of Shirow's manga, because that also is just full of whatever popped into his mind.
Shiro doesn't go into... He doesn't pull from German philosophers.
No.
Right? His randomness is different from the randomness of this movie.
Yeah. At least Shiro was honest with us that he didn't have a point.
Right. Yes.
This is just the jottings of a madman.
Yes.
Here, Oshii wants us to believe that he has some kind of concrete thematic point to make. And you know, a fire hose of quotes does not a convincing argument make.
Yes, that I agree with that completely. Okay, so after they question this guy, they magically appear at this weird mansion.
Magically, just like that. Another
next
missing
scene,
space.
they're at this weird place. They go inside. There's a little girl who looks like
it's the Major's body.
It's the Major's body at the entrance going in. There's
also another basset hound.
Yeah, there's a weird word in Hebrew on the ground. They're like, "What's that?" Don't know.
It'll be familiar to people who are familiar with the legend of the golem.
But they go up and they find Kim's body. He's like in a doll. He's no longer human. He's completely transferred himself into a doll so he can understand death in some way. There's a long speech about it.
It all just goes nowhere.
But
incidentally, I think he still has a human brain in there.
Yeah, maybe.
So there's no difference between him and Bato then.
Are we sure there's a human brain in there?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think there is.
He seems to be like really completely in a doll.
Yes, but what's the difference between a doll and a cyborg here?
Well, cyborg is still a cybernetic organism.
A cyborg is
a cybernetic.
What did Bato say in the first film, that a cyborg is different from a robot because it's treated as a human being by the law? And the Major said, well, that's not very comforting because I don't really know if I'm human or not, and the law isn't going to tell me whether I am or not. But here, so Kim is in what is described as a doll, and he's visually very different from Bato and the Major. Bato and the Major both their designers, I suppose, were at pains to make them look to look human.
Yeah.
Aside from Bato's strange doll's eyes, he looks human. In fact, he's aged since the last film. His hair has grown and he has more lines on his face.
Yeah.
But he's a cyborg. Why would a cyborg age?
I don't know. Why did Data age?
The answer to your question is in the medium.
Yes.
Data ages because Brent Spiner is a human being.
Yes.
Bato is a drawing.
Yes. Yes. I don't know. Maybe he
chose to.
Aging. Yeah. Maybe he's got age skin. You know, he's got this special skin that gets older.
Maybe he asked when he went in for his checkup. He said, "Can you make me age naturally?"
Yeah.
So that I can hang on to my humanity a bit longer. But Kim is not in a body that looks anything like the other cyborgs.
Yes. He's got like a hinged jaw. He looks like a marionette.
He does look like a marionette. So, and he's done that because of his obsession with dolls and with their cultivation of zero awareness or something. We got some kind of like Zen Buddhist stuff.
Yeah. And that part of that is he's trying to understand death by being in this stuff. Somehow it's going to do...
a bit of a diatribe about animals and dolls and gods. About how each of them have different levels of consciousness and levels of awareness. And you're sort of like envious of the doll, of animals because they have zero awareness.
Okay.
They are, I guess, creatures of instinct.
Okay.
And so they've managed to cultivate the intellectual perfection that zero awareness is. This sounds a little bit like Zen, I suppose. It might have something to do with the title, Innocence. But I'm not sure what it has to do with dolls, really.
No. I couldn't put it together.
And the quotes aren't helping. Whatever. Anyway, but to return to my point, I don't see the only difference between Kim and Bato. I'm pretty sure he has a human brain in there, because dubbing, where he told in the world of the movie, you can't move a ghost forcibly from a human brain to a robot one.
Okay.
Because it kills the original and the copy is inferior.
Oh, is the copy inferior?
Well, I think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure actually, but I think so. I don't think it doesn't seem consistent with the universe that Kim could transfer his ghost into a cyber brain exclusively. I think you still need human tissue. So Kim's choice just seems like a peculiar kind of masochism. He's just put himself in a non-functional cyborg body so that he can feel more like a marionette.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, there's some sort of purity about dolls in this movie. Innocence.
See, it's some sort of sex thing. He's a perv.
Yes.
He just wants to be in a doll body.
But he does reveal that the
doll is actually emaciated and looks a little bit like like an ascetic, like a monk.
Yeah. But he reveals that the Locus Solus' manufacturing is happening in this offshore facility. But also we learned that Bato and Tokusa are actually, they've been hacked and they're in this mental time loop. They have to repeat this scene in the mansion 3 times.
This is all, yes.
And it's different, a little bit different each time, because the second time they come through, the Kim is actually Togusa's body in a marionette version of Togusa.
Yeah,
and
but I think with Kim's consciousness in it, but it looks like
right,
Togusa.
but it looks like Togusa. And then
because he has a very long talk, which I can't remember a word of.
Yeah,
where he sort of slowly walks towards camera for about a year.
Yeah.
And he must have crossed that space already, so he must have been walking on the spot.
It's Dino's paradox. So
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, but basically they come in the third time. It's Bato, a marionette version of Bato. Finally, they figure out they're in a loop and they get out of it.
Well, he has a little bit of help from the Major.
Yes,
the Major helps him.
That's right.
The Major flashes him the code to 501, which we know from the first film is their secret code for when she communicates with him. And she also changes the word Emmet to Met, which is what the rabbi did when he wanted to deactivate the golem.
Yeah.
He would wipe away the first Hebrew letter, to change truth to death. Great, if you know. That's kind of a cool touch if you...
Well, this one is good because they explain it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If they didn't explain it, that would be really strange.
Yeah.
It also, the way that they spell Emmet and Meth is really... is odd. It must be the Ramaji version of the Hebrew, because it's Anyway, I want to talk about this mansion a little bit before we move on.
Sure.
So this is the Locus... But strangely, this mansion is also Locus Solus. This is the eponymous Locus Solus of the novel that I was discussing earlier.
Oh, right.
A big, strange mansion full of bizarre objets d'art. Yeah. And also, crucially, a series of... In the novel, the owner of the Locus Solus... The mansion. Locus Solus, by the way, means singular location or unique location.
Okay.
And the owner makes tableaux vivants, so like static plays out of human bodies that he revivifies with a kind of serum.
Okay.
And then positions them in kind of like grotesque scenes.
Right. Yeah.
Which is what Kim essentially... you can see that he's done that throughout his mansion with its creepy objects and stuff.
Yeah, he's got this little maid robot that's a bit like something, also like out of Blade Runner.
Yeah, it's very much like out of Blade Runner. It serves tea. It's actually a little boy.
Yes.
You can briefly see his chin when his clothes burst off. Thanks, Oshii. Also, when they are trapped in that repeating loop, that's also a kind of like what was happening in the novel. The Bato and Togusa have become the puppets in the tableau vivant.
Right, okay, right.
Over and over. There's also a big music box in the front hall. So all through this sequence, there's a kind of creepy music playing all the time. A very, very large music box with a very, very large disc, about 3 meters wide, that's turning slowly, and the grooves are playing ding, 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 and it has Locus Solus written on it. They recorded this music in a quarry so they could get the echo, and they built that music box.
Jesus Christ, okay.
And not just one, but 3 of those large metal discs were constructed by a specialty company that makes things like this at the cost of 300,000 yen per disc.
Whoa, okay. Wow.
Instantly, they would make props for everything first.
Right.
The costumes everyone's wearing.
Right.
The that enormous foot sculpture out the front of the Locus Solus mansion, which has the Latin in front of it. It's Deus ex hominus, I think.
Okay.
So, of course, Deus ex machinus, we're all very familiar with. Deus ex hominus, God from man.
Yeah.
Except they make a mistake. The first time you see it, it says Deus hominus. I was reading it. That doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense in Latin. But later, in a later scene, it's corrected to X, and I was like, okay.
I have to say, regarding the building of models and everything, I did like the rotoscoping in this movie. I think that the naturalistic movements, but it kind of, this movie constantly gave me something I liked and then frustrated me. Because you would have this cool rotoscoping, and there's a shot we didn't talk about in the 95 one, when she gets out of the sea, when she's been deep sea diving, and she like brushes back the water in her hair. And there's a great rotoscoped kind of shot there. There's similar stuff like that in here, which I like. But then there's these scenes where when they're talking, two people are talking, it's just, you're just looking at static heads.
Yeah.
With no movement.
Oh my god.
Maybe somebody's lips will move. And then when the Major finally downloads, she says, I can only download part of my consciousness, so I can't move my face. I'm like, wait a second. Is this for story, or did you just run out of money to animate this character's face?
Does she actually say, I can't move my face?
She says, like, this is the most expression I can get.
Oh my god, I think that's another thing the English dub did. That's cool. I didn't get that from the Japanese version. Yeah, unfortunately, on my second rewatch, I got no dialogue whatsoever, because all you can hear is just. But even the subtitles didn't show any dialogue from the film,
right?
Because it's just because they're talking in Japanese, obviously. So I'm just reading the commentary, and they were just jabbering about all sorts of nonsense.
So now we get a physical, not cyber, attack on this offshore manufacturing.
Oh right,
Locosolus base, right? So
Bato's decided it's not enough to have got Kim. They've got Kim.
Yeah.
And he has some kind of connection with the company. Maybe he works for them. He was probably the one that hacked Bato in the convenience store.
Yes, I think they established that. I think they do say that. Yeah.
Why did he do that?
Well, they were trying to discredit Section 9.
Yeah, why? Because they're investigating the company?
Yeah, I guess that was it.
Well, and then it would just go away if you can discredit Section 9. And how did Kim...
Well, he's awesome. How did he hack him? He's awesome. Was that going to be your question?
Well, how did he hack him in the convenience store?
He just remote hacked him. He could have hacked him anywhere.
It would... Yeah, but... What, just like that?
Yeah, he's good. He's that good.
But Bato wasn't even connected to anything.
I don't think he...
The interpreter...
He Wi-Fi hacked him.
The interpreter in the first film at least was like connected to something when she was hacked by the Puppet Master, incidentally, which was a program designed to do nothing but hack people.
Yes.
Like, is Kim better than the Puppet Master? Better than a sentient algorithm that exists only to fuck with you?
Yeah.
I call bullshit. At least when they're in his mansion, I can get it. I can get that he set his mansion up as a trap to hack people.
Yeah.
But when Bato just wandered into some convenience store, and Kim is way up north in the... I don't know. Also, isn't it kind of a coincidence that Bato's informant put him onto the exact same person that happened to be the one that hacked him earlier in the week?
Is that a coincidence, or is there some sort of connection there that
it's possible.
We're putting together?
It's possible there's one of the missing scenes explained it a little more plausibly.
Yeah.
Anyway, they decide that Kim's cyber brain is not sufficient evidence, like there's plausible deniability, so Bato just decides to John McClane it.
Yeah, he's going to raid this place. But there's a pretty great action sequence that's like 20 minutes. Goes in there, the factory comes alive, and all these creepy dolls come to life. And
yes. Okay.
And the Major downloads a portion of her consciousness from a satellite into
one of the gynoids. Yeah. Okay. I have a question. So while Bato is I've got bio in my notes. So Bato, that's autocorrect. Bato is like John Wicking around this ship. It's like an enormous kind of ship out in international waters. How did he get into it? We don't know. We're not shown.
No, we are shown. There's some kind of weird whale ship that they bring in.
Yeah, it's great. It's being driven by a guy inside it. It does look pretty cool. It's like a weird biomechanical... Yeah. Well, I guess it's wholly mechanical, but made to look like a whale. Like a whale that swims him in.
Yeah.
And Bato even says, like, the pilot of the whale even says, like, are you mental? Like...
Yeah.
This way of bringing you in is incredibly dangerous. Yeah. You're a cyborg. If you'd missed me, you would have gone right to the bottom here. And they're like in the North Sea. It's not the North Sea, but it's like the Japanese equivalent of the North Sea. It's really deep. And the guy's just like, I had a partner who used to do this all the time. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay. But we don't see how he gets into the ship. Like, the whale delivers him to the ship.
Yes, I see what you mean, yeah.
again, I have...
Do we... Yeah,
no, we definitely don't, because Oshii mentions it. He says, I thought about putting it... It's in a very Shirow-esque moment. Oshii says on the commentary, I thought about putting a scene in here where I showed Bato, like, climbing up, showing the scale of the ship. But then I decided it would be too difficult to animate, so I didn't do it.
Right.
As he's running around the ship, there's a kind of cool sequence where a map of the ship is being overlaid on what he can see visually. Looks alright. At the same time, Kim is aiding him in his penetration of the vessel by hacking it. And how he's doing that is he's got Kim there with him, and he's using Kim's cyber brain, he says, as a kind of like a firewall / attacking ICE program.
Right.
So, because Kim already has an in because he's a trusted member of the Locus Solus organization, or if not trusted, at least he's associated with it.
Yeah.
So he has access. And also, it's going to protect Togusa from any kind of hostile attack barriers or ice. And in fact, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Kim ends up being killed by the vessel's ice, but Togusa survives. And that explains what they were doing in the first film. Do you remember when the Major and the Puppet Master are plugged into one another in that final scene where they're lying next to one another? For some reason, Bato does it via the dead or unconscious pilot of the think tank.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't really understand why they were doing that, and I figured maybe it was for safety reasons.
Okay.
And I guess that's kind of confirmed in this film. Like, it's like a human firewall.
Right. Okay.
Using a person's brain as as an intermediary between two operating systems, so that the other person's brain gets fried first if you get attacked. And then here's the point where we have I guess you describe them as drones, but they're cyborgs. They're cybernetic people. They run the ship's computerized infrastructure, and they're very concerned about what's happening, about Bato running around and the hostile cyber attack that Togusa is doing. And their dialogue seems to be Cantonese.
Right.
And it sounds pretty cool. They've heavily kind of processed and modulated their voices.
Right.
It sounds very... Oshii points out that Chinese is unique for its kind of urgency and brevity of expression. They're really kind of like rattling out all these turns very quickly. They successfully fend off Togusa's attack, but then there's another attack. A virus has got loose, and as you pointed out, it's activated all the gynoids on the ships, and then uploaded them, Matrix style, with martial arts, with kung fu.
Right.
Okay, a big question. Who did that?
I thought it was that they were activating... I thought because they detected Bato's infiltration and the Major's infiltration, and that they...
But the Major hasn't infiltrated at this point.
The Locus Solus activated these gynoids to fight off Bato.
You would think so, but there are two problems with that. The first is that in dialogue, they actually say a virus has been activated. Second of all, the gynoids attack their own security.
Oh, that's true. Okay, so the virus came from the Major.
Possible, except again, the Major is attacked by the gynoids. Okay. There is no answer. This is just a plot hole.
Huh.
My best guess would be maybe it was Kim. Because Kim does seem to have a certain amount of volition after he dies, because he projects some kanji after death that says something about marionettes. Human life is like a marionette. It dances for a while, and when its strings are cut, it collapses.
Do you want me to tell you what the Wikipedia page says about the virus? We've never done this on the show before.
Tim does it, so I think it's okay.
Okay.
According to Wikipedia...
Resolved to gather material evidence, Bato infiltrates the Locus Solus headquarters ship, while Togusa remotely hacks the security systems using an unaware Kim as a proxy.
Okay.
The ship's security becomes aware of the hacking and retaliates with the virus that fries Kim's cyberbrain.
Okay.
Simultaneously, a hidden virus loads a combat program into the production line gynoids, causing them to attack everyone on board, as easily slaughtering the poorly armed and panicked security force. Okay. So as you pointed out, it says hidden virus, but it doesn't say where the hidden virus came from.
It says that uses a passive voice. Yeah. The virus loaded itself onto
a hidden virus loads a combat program. Yeah, so the virus loaded the combat program, but who
loaded the virus?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Oh, you know what? It might be like might have been like a default security that it just activates. Maybe they do call it a virus though.
Yeah, they say
don't say
specifically a
it's
virus. It's not a security backup
activation.
program. No.
Yeah,
Someone's done it. There's no good answer because it's just a problem. It's just a hole in the,
all right.
just a plot hole. So as I said, my best guess that it might be Kim's insurance policy or something.
Right.
That if Locus Solus ever took him out, he would strike back at them from beyond the grave, maybe. And that might be why that kanji shows up. But that's a ballpark kind of guess. Like that,
right.
That's just complete.
Well, it doesn't matter because these things move around like crazy, and it looks
really
amazing,
weird and cool. Yeah.
This is nothing you've ever seen. This
is a pretty cool sequence. This is everyone's favorite bit of the movie, and is almost worth sitting through an hour and 20 minutes.
This is my memory.
Turgid.
From when I watched it in 2004, I didn't understand because my Japanese wasn't good enough to understand what was happening on screen. And I was like, boy, this movie is slow. And then suddenly in the last 20 minutes, it completely amps up. And it's almost like the opposite of the 95 movie, where you get an hour of like action, and then suddenly there's like this 10-minute sequence at the end where it's just talking heads that aren't even moving. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like opposites. Yeah, so there's a pretty groovy action scene. These poor hapless security guards get immediately taken down.
Yeah.
Batou, I guess, is a cooler customer, or he has a higher caliber weapon, because he's able to take down the gynoids fairly effectively, but then the Major comes and helps him. After they've taken down a few of the gynoids, the Major needs to go and shut down, I guess, the ship now?
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but they...
Well, she needs to shut the whole ship down, and if she can do that, then the gynoids...
But they're on to the fact that they're dubbing humans.
Not yet.
Well, the Major suspects it, and then she says, "Oh, you suspected the same thing, Batou," and he's like, "Yeah, like they have a suspicion."
Okay, fair enough.
That they've been dubbing humans.
Great, fair enough. So now they want to shut it down. That makes sense, actually. That makes sense. I'm glad you watched it twice because I missed that. So they want to shut it down. The Major finds a kind of cabinet. She yanks it open, and there's a handle in there that she needs to pull out. Very reminiscent of Ellen Ripley in the first Alien movie.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's direct inspiration confirmed by Oshii in the director's commentary.
Right.
Says, I was inspired by aliens in this bit.
Right.
So she busts her arms, yanking it out again in a clear reference to the Major destroying her arms in the first film. Then it comes out, it looks really cool. It's kind of hexagonal or octagonal, and she plugs herself into it. We then get a scene of her defeating the administrators. That's all shown in this kind of swirling
CGI.
column.
Yeah.
It looks pretty cool.
Yep.
It looks excellent. If more of the CG had been used like this,
is like the 95 CG. I like the CG where it's showing cyberspace stuff, not trying to recreate the actual world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely agree. More of that would have been good.
And in fact, this thing that she pulled out of the wall has all this weird, like, text or something, like red text, like, that's swirling around.
Looks really cool.
Weird. I can't
more of that would have
describe
been great. Then we get the reveal, if we even care about the reveal at this point. And that's where they go down to the bows of the ship, and they find these creepy capsules with human faces poking out of like little portholes. Yeah. Incidentally, those faces were molded as well. They made for the animators need a reference. It's where it figure out that the little girls are being killed in order to put their consciousness in robots. Now, but there's a key difference here from the manga. The girls were told by the shipping inspector to put rage and malice in the dolls, and then that would call attention and bring the police to rescue them.
Okay.
So it's the little girls doing it, in fact.
Yeah, right.
They just, I guess, concentrated really hard on being angry. Okay. But if they mess things up, it's implied that they did it of their volition as they were being scanned. Question: wouldn't they have already been pretty angry about what was happening to them? Frightened, horrified, that you had to concentrate in order to make the.
Oh, here's what Wikipedia says. Batou rescues a young girl from a ghost dubbing machine, and she explains that Jack Watson, I don't think his name was Watson in the dub. Anyway, Jack Watson, that was the shipping inspector, having learned the truth about Locus Solus, promised to save the girls by tampering with the ghosting process. This caused the gynoids to murder their owners, allowing Watson to attract police attention and indirectly to kill the Yakuza boss.
Whoever wrote this is no more... I don't think has any clearer idea than we do.
That's a problem with reading the Wikipedia page. But anyway, yes, okay.
But I don't think... That's not the sense that I got at all from the film. I got the sense that he told them to do it. Because what happens next is, again, Batou, like in the manga, reacts with anger.
Yeah.
Wildly misplaced anger.
Yeah.
He's angry at the girl.
Yeah.
Why is he angry at the girl? In the manga, he's angry at the girl because people died. Human beings died.
Yeah.
In Innocence, Batou is angry at the girl because the dolls died.
Right.
Again, what a bizarre perspective.
Yeah.
But I guess it's what Oshii has kind of been trying to establish, that there's a fundamental equality or value of humans, animals, and dolls.
Yes. Yes.
They all possess a spirit or a goat or a soul.
But then there's also the theme that's been coming up of the thing that you create being a reflection. And we talked about the mirrors as reflections, and now the dolls are also reflections of a different kind. But then, did we get all that talk about the reflections creating evil or something?
I don't even want to talk about that, because that made no sense to me.
You can't piece it together.
No. So, I guess Batou maybe... So, I guess the dolls have a reflection of the little girl's anger. And they've also been given a ghost, I suppose, by this process. And that has... What? Did that make them more or less valuable? Because they've lost their innocence and become... And now have a human inner life, a human soul. Is that what Batou is angry about? That dolls have been infected with human corruption? Or is he angry that they've been given the capacity for human suffering and they were elevated by this process? Who knows and who cares? The little girl basically cries and says, "What the hell? You're supposed to be rescuing me and instead you're judging me."
Yeah.
She says, "I never asked to be a doll."
Yeah.
Batou says, "Those dolls never asked to be human."
Yeah.
And the little girl says, "Well, I never asked to be a doll either." And
Yeah.
I guess Batou snaps the fuck out of it.
Yeah.
And then he and the Major have a short discussion about what life is like for the Major now.
Yeah.
He asks her, "Are you happy?"
That's not a question for her anymore.
No.
Yeah.
And as an answer, she offers that quote about the elephant again. Again, wildly inappropriate for this context.
Right.
That quote is about selecting friends.
Right.
Or worthy companions. It's not about being a transcendent post-human being. It's supposed to be about this life.
Yeah.
Completely inappropriate use of that quote. Then she logs out. She says, "Whenever you log in the net, I'll be there." Yeah. She logs out, she collapses. And then the film sort of ends with a really weird sequence.
Batou gets his dog back from Togusa's family.
Yep.
Who had been looking after it.
And this... and then we get a sustained shot where Batou and his dog, and Togusa and his daughter, and a doll that Togusa has...
A toy doll, yeah.
A toy doll. So this time, a real doll.
Yeah.
Like a blonde, blue-eyed doll.
Yeah.
Normal doll.
Yeah.
Togusa's holding his daughter, who's holding this doll, facing Batou, who's holding a dog. And they just stare at one another for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
What does this mean? I don't know. I guess these are all the things, all the beings that the film has variously described as possessing a measure of awareness or spirituality or a soul. But what's the conclusion? I don't know. What I do know is, to quote a review I watched online, quote, "Togusa completely disregards all that happened to him and gives his daughter a doll."
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, not the best gift.
Yeah.
After everything we've said and learned and been attacked by through the course of this movie.
Yeah.
All right.
Trivia.
Sure,
Anything?
I'll just jump right in.
Yeah.
Yeah, heaps of trivia, heaps. So this film had a budget of 2 billion yen.
Okay.
Which is a pretty big budget.
Yeah.
It's about 6 times higher than the first Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
It's about $20 million US in 2004 bucks. Box office 10.1 million US.
Okay.
So not really a success.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, the real measure of this film, I suppose, is how well it's done, I suppose, on home video and things like that.
Yeah.
And its impact.
I don't feel like it had the legs of the first one. I don't hear people talking about it. By the way, the franchise at this stage standalone complex was on TV.
It was already on TV, yeah. Yeah.
So we had 3 years of standalone complex when this movie comes out. So,
yeah. So Ghost in the Shell is rolling along.
Yeah.
But Oshii has been given kind of carte blanche to make a...
Right.
He's interested. I guess the first film did well enough and they're willing to take a chance on him. He's been off in Poland filming some sort of strange Polish live action movie.
Yes, we talked about that last... Avalon.
Avalon, yeah.
We talked about that last
episode
before, yeah.
So this budget is very large, but it's still comparable to kind of Studio Ghibli's output from the period.
Right.
You know, Princess Mononoke in 97 and Spirited Away in 2001 have a similar budget of around 2 billion yen.
Without any computer graphics in those movies.
Yeah, they're vastly better looking films. Although, having said that, this was probably, for the production company that made this film, Production IG, it's probably the most expensive film they've ever done.
Right.
I certainly couldn't find a list of anything that they'd done that was more expensive.
Right.
It technically a sole Japanese production, although Industrial Light and Magic did some of the work.
Okay.
At on the director's commentary.
Skywalker Sound is involved too.
Skywalker. They mentioned Skywalker Sound a lot.
Okay.
On the on the director's commentary. Whenever he wants to talk about how Americans didn't get it, he talks about Skywalker Sound, how he would send them things. Like Americans didn't get that scene with burning of the dolls, for example. They thought that it was cruel, and that maybe they were burning the malfunctioning droids or something as punishment. And Oshii is like, no, that's not what it means. He says, quote, "We Japanese burn stuff as spiritual appeasement of the objects." It took, as I said, it took almost 3 years to make. To help raise the very large budget, Production IG asked Toshio Suzuki from Studio Ghibli to co-produce.
Okay.
That had the effect that companies that usually funded Studio Ghibli films were willing to fund this film because of his association with it, including Disney. So Disney is one of the companies that contributed money to this movie. Toshio Suzuki made almost no input on the final movie, aside from coming up with the title Innocence, allegedly, and also choosing that kind of pop song that plays over the end credits.
Yeah, right. Okay. That reminded me of the end of Metal Gear Solid 2. Or actually, a lot of the Metal Gears have that kind of...
Have a pop song over the final...
Yeah, the jazz lounge number over the end credits.
As we mentioned last week, it was distributed in the US by DreamWorks, specifically by Go Fish, which is their specialty distribution arm of the company. As I mentioned, Oshii got the idea from travelling to New York. He said the dolls made by Hans Belber. That's what inspired him to write the film. He did a lot of travel around, scouting locations. So obviously the cathedral, he went to Italy, the cathedral in Milan, inspired that very brief shot of Locus Solus HQ that we never get to go inside of. The Locus Solus mansion was also based on a real location.
Yeah.
I have no idea where, but I just know on the commentary that they mentioned that it was a real location. That's pretty much all I have for trivia. I do have a lot of quotes from Oshii on various topics. I could read a few of them out.
Okay.
On the idea of objects possessing a spirit, he said, maybe if an object has somewhat of a human shape, maybe it could be considered as, instead of an object, it is partly human, or it has a soul, or it has a spirit. In my movie, you cannot dispose of objects easily, because they believe that if you have it for a long time, a ghost develops within that object. So kind of imbuing objects with
an emergent consciousness,
or just or just a quality.
Energy. Yes,
a quality that makes it more than a thing.
Yes,
like human belief or human love, or human awareness rubs off on it somehow and makes it into Although he goes on to say that he still considers humans to be a different category of being than robots.
Right.
You know, he says, even when a human becomes mechanized, I still think that a human is a human. You know, although robots and so a human can't become a robot, but he says robots and humans are already close because of this common spirit.
Okay.
Sure, but it's just fundamentally less interesting than the questions that were being asked in the first film about the nature of memory and identity.
Yes.
Whether or not my Halo Jones statuette has a personality is, I think, a much less interesting question than am I a real person?
Yeah.
Are my memories trustworthy? do my memories make me who I am, or is it my body? Those are important questions that resonate and have a deep kind of like significance and meaning, and are well supported by the storytelling in the first film. I think it's a real kind of like Dog's Breakfast.
You know, if I can open a tab, when you were talking about how his themes were the opposite of mind in the first one and body in the second one, reminded me of Terminator 1 and 2. Where Terminator 1 was like, machines are bad. And every time you saw technology in the first movie, it was negatively portrayed. Like when the roommate is listening to her headphones while she's having sex with the guy, or they go to the club that's called Tech Noir, and the Terminator itself.
Yes.
You get the second one, you get the redemption of the Terminator.
That's right.
And everything is portrayed more positively. And in fact, Cameron had to make it that way because he's using computers to make the movie.
Ah, right.
So, like,
the medium is the message again.
That's right.
Very good.
Yeah, so I actually think I feel like that does not work in Terminator 2's favor. I think it's less interesting to have a pro-technology movie than to have the anti-technology movie.
Yeah.
And I think we're kind of stuck.
That's a great, that's a great comparison.
Just same way here.
Perhaps you'd be interested in some alternative explanations for what might be going on in the film, according to reviewers and kind of like my own brain. One thing is that they sometimes talk about external memory.
Okay.
They kind of drop a line here or there about like memory being externalized, like about the cities. One way of looking at the film is this is two people that have access to Google trying to impress one another. So one way of thinking about mobile, like having Google on our phones, is now that we don't have to do a lot of the work of retention that we used to have to. We can now look up a thing instantly. Batou and Togusa both have this function in their heads. So when they're sitting in a car trying desperately to impress one another, they're actually Googling quotes.
Googling quotes. Googling Bibles.
Google, give me
songs.
a quote.
Yeah.
Give me a quote about this that I can impress my friend with. And they're both doing it incessantly. So I guess in that sense, it's a descriptive kind of warning of the dangers of relying on your phone too much. You will become a pretentious bore.
Yes.
Another great interpretation I got from watching a YouTube channel called the Dr. Show, which is by a Japanese behavioral psychologist who applies a behavioralist analysis to films that he watches. His behavioralist interpretation of the movie is that Batou is mentally ill.
Okay.
Specifically, he labels him with a condition called the philosopher's disease.
Okay.
Which is a reductive condition that makes you become obsessed with metaphysics.
Okay.
And focused and obsessed with objects instead of yourself and reality.
I think Oshii has that condition as much as Batou does.
He says there are 4 stages he describes 4 stages of the disease: depression, love of objects, hatred of the flesh, and leaving the physical world. He says that at each point in the film, Batou encounters people that reinforce his delusion rather than trying to steer him away from it. When he meets with Dr. Haraway in the lab, she reinforces his love of objects by kind of instilling in him the notion that objects are more real than people.
Yeah.
That children are a kind of dull mirror of the perfection that a doll represents. Then when he meets with Kim, he's reinforced with the notion of the hatred of the flesh, that the body is imperfect, that it's something to be despised and resisted, and transfer yourself into a marionette. And then finally he meets the Major, who has kind of reached the apotheosis of this mental illness and completely discarded her body for the world of metaphysics, of poorly defined philosophy. She's become a creature that exists solely on the net. This video I really enjoyed because at each point, like, he would apply a behavioralist analysis to the kind of arguments that the characters were advancing, and he just tears them to shreds.
Yeah.
Because this is completely wrong.
Yeah.
This is a complete misconception of why humans engage in the act of reproduction. From the behavioralist perspective, this is why they do it. And it's like, nice one, Dr. Show. Pretty good. So there you go. That resonated with me. This is one man's journey into mental illness. The fact that he's a cyborg is neither here nor there.
Yeah.
In fact, Bato's nature as a cyborg has no bearing on anything that he really experiences in the movie. His melancholy is more pining after the Major than it is any kind of stress about his own body.
There's talk about his partnering up with Togusa and him being unsatisfied.
Actually, he's like a lamer partner.
Yeah.
So he's not experiencing existential angst. He's experiencing depression because he misses his friend.
Yeah.
Why would you tell a story with cyborgs in it that has nothing, where the fact that they're cyborgs has no impact on their...
Well, he was remote hacked in the convenience store.
That's true, he was. And on the themes, then. Cyborgization doesn't seem to have as much importance on the themes as kind of discussing the idea about dolls and things like that. Incidentally, just before we move on, Bateau has a gun arm that's revealed at the very end of the movie.
Wait, when did he first use it?
At the end. He blasts a gynoid with it at the very end, at a moment of extremity.
Yeah, right.
I think maybe they replaced his... Because it's his right arm, it's the arm he shot. I think maybe they replaced it with this cool gun arm, and there's no warning. He just... he's just about to be attacked by a gynoid, and suddenly he shoots her with this arm from nowhere. Pretty rad. Alright, let's do our votes.
Okay, alright, this movie... Oh, so let's talk about Robot Rondo, which I liked a bit more this time around.
This is one of the more memorable stories.
And maybe I was more forgiving somehow. Maybe I was getting used to having this guy in my house talking about random stuff about robots, and I'm like, okay, dude.
Yeah. I would vote yay for that story, because it's one of the more memorable ones and less confusing ones.
Yes.
It's pretty clear what's going on most of the time.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go yay for Robot Rondo.
Good. yeah, I think I'll vote yay for it as well.
Okay, this movie had some good bits in it, had some good visuals. I like the first half, especially when I rewatched it. For some reason, I like the first half more. But as soon as they go to Etorofu, it's over.
Yeah, agreed.
Except for the climax, the action-filled climax. Yeah.
It's also nay for me. Notwithstanding the plot holes and the incoherent slurry that passes for thematic development, it just doesn't... It also... Things that I loved about the first film, like how grounded that world was and how it felt so lived in. We're in it for such a short amount of time, only, like an hour and 15 minutes or so. And yet it feels so real.
Yeah.
And the people in it are real too.
Yeah.
They seem to be experiencing... They feel like real people and they talk like real people. And the Major's struggle feels real too. Yeah. I can relate to it. No one in this film feels like the opposite.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like a real world.
Yeah.
Everything's changed. The aesthetics are completely different because of the aggressive use of CG.
Yes.
It already feels artificial because of that.
Yeah.
Second of all, the locations don't have a common aesthetic. Aesthetic, they're all different. We're in like old elevators, some of that consistent, chunky, industrial cyberpunk style from the first film is absent in favor of weird biomechanical things, like grimy elevators in the police building. Why isn't it a big chunky elevator with 20 moving parts like it was in the first movie?
Yeah.
Why did we lose that?
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Would you rewatch this or 2017 first?
Oh, this definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
But maybe on fast forward, and certainly the English dub because it sounds.
It's pretty good.
It sounds good.
The dub's good.
My final thing is talking about people. The people don't feel real.
Yeah.
People don't act like this.
Yes. Yes, people don't talk like that. Yeah.
To quote a reviewer, human beings do not converse like this, with each conversation a competition to out-obscure the previous person with an even more galaxy-brained quote or tortured philosophical musing.
Yeah.
I don't care about what these people really, and that's the death of your movie.
Yeah.
If I don't care about your characters, why would I be invested in what's happening to them?
Yeah. Okay, adaptation. This movie is missing Kazunori Ito, who teased out those threads of the manga into an interesting movie that was subtle about what it was trying to say. This movie's got Oshii, who has completely stripped the tone of the comic, overlaid some themes on it.
But just poured his mania for all kinds of things, including basset hounds, into it like an absolute torrent of nonsense.
Yeah.
So, nay.
Yeah, it's an A. It's not like the comic, and it's not an improved film version of the comic or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I might take a step back and say having too many ideas and themes and having a whole lot of minutiae that interests only you does sound quite a lot like the manga.
Yes, but I will point out that reading the manga, sometimes I could stop and look at that panel for a minute.
Yeah.
2 minutes. Try to understand what he was trying to say. You cannot do that on film when stuff is just driving past you at 24 frames a second.
Brilliant, Kumar. You've anticipated my next point, which is that this film would probably work better as a manga.
Yes.
And that's a damning indictment when you're trying to adapt a manga to a different medium.
Yes.
So, no. Yes. I will, if you like, I'll read something that Oshii said about about sequels. So, talking about adaptations, is a sequel, I suppose, is a kind of adaptation of an original film. Here's what he had to say. The only success to making a sequel to the first movie is to make it a completely different movie. If you make it a similar movie, then it will become a failure eventually. Maybe. Going on. Betraying the public's expectation is not a wrong thing to do as a filmmaker. I would agree.
Okay.
What you need to do is make the film better than their expectations. With that point, I do not agree.
Yeah. Okay, before we leave Ghost in the Shell, we did get a letter.
Oh, amazing. From
Aiden. Aiden is the guy that always writes in about manga stuff.
Great to hear from you, Aiden.
Apparently he's a letterer. I did not know this before. But he said, hey there, really enjoyed the 2 Ghost in the Shell episodes. I'm on a pretty similar wavelength about the manga. It's gorgeous and highlights Shirow's talents as an illustrator and his weakness as a writer and sequential artist. For all the difficulty I have with it as a comic, the Dark Horse release is a triumph of lettering. Tom Orzechowski and Susie Lee did the lettering for that edition and pulled off the Herculean feat of fitting all that damn text into those dense pages. Both the dialogue as well as the glut of signage and sound effects while flipping the art. Orzechowski lettered the Claremont run on X-Men, so he had practice fitting large blocks of text onto the pages. Lol. While flipping manga isn't in vogue anymore, I still prefer this version over the more recent hardcover unflipped release with the new lettering because of the great detail.
Wow, fantastic. Great to hear that. Shout out to the letterers.
Yes.
Often overlooked, but, but artists.
Okay, so please like, rate, review, subscribe. I think especially on Apple Podcasts. That seems to be the place we need the reviews most. I don't know. I hear these things. I don't know if they're true or not.
It's your ghost whispering to you.
That's right. You can contact us through our email address, which is in the show notes. Or you can send us a DM through Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. All those links are in the show notes, or even leave a comment on YouTube. And please join our Patreon at patreon.com/comicbookmovie Oblivion so we can buy like DVDs with the official subtitles on them and not have to download stuff.
Yeah, please come up with subscriber rewards. Maybe I'll watch the film 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, next week we're going to do the mostly unfabulous social life of Ethan Green from 2006. It's out there, a little bit tricky to find. Shot on video, it looks like, from what I've seen.
Oh my goodness, great.
But,
that's a big difference to...
yeah. It'll be a huge difference to this week. But I've heard people say that it's, like, decent despite being on video. You can find the comics, probably, I found them on Archive. So the comic was by a fellow named Eric Orner. What I'm trying to get at is, I think this stuff is pretty obscure. You're going to have to go online to look for it.
Okay. Good.
And we'll leave it there.
You be given